lots of breaking news. Well, I guess not breaking news, but lots of news to go through, lots of line machinations we got to work through. I'm Chris Baggs, joined as always, one of the smartest men in the world of fantasy NBA analysis, Mr. Fast Eddie Fear. How are you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for your brain on this because it's an interesting slate. It feels sort of obvious in some spots, sort of perhaps obvious to go the other way in others, but I want to hear what you're thinking. We don't have a plug today, even though it's on the screen. It's Tuesday, so we're not actually do it. But hit that like button. That's the plug we're going to hit up front. Please give us a like before we start all the content. Helps the picks get better. So it helps us avoid all the TJ McConnells of the world. I think that's what likes do. So please, Eddie, if you were on yesterday, what would you have done with TJ McConnell?
I was on yesterday. I crashed.
Oh, it's right. You were on at the tail end. I forgot.
Yeah, I like TJ McConnell a lot. Look, it's TJ McConnell versus Seth Curry, which was the most immediate pivot that brought up. It is a much better spot for TJ McConnell. I had him projected about 6 points higher. You got a much better Seth Curry game, but even in I don't know how to explain this. It sort of reminds me of poker, where you see a guy go into a hand, and one guy's got King Queen and the other guy's got Jack 10, and that's a very good situation for King Queen. Jack 10 still beats you out there like 35% of the time. Like, it just fantasy sports and NBA, while more predictable, still isn't such a thing where you get head-to-head comparisons where one guy is going to outscore the other one 90% of the time. That isn't how it goes. So top of my heading it, I imagine TJ McConnell outscores Seth Curry 70% of the time last night. Maybe it's 65, but it's somewhere around there. And you could certainly make a very reasonable counter-argument saying, well, with how high TJ McConnell got owned, Seth Curry was a better play. I'm fine with that. I don't recall the number that Seth Curry went off the slate at. So that very possibly is correct. And again, for all players, there's an ownership point where he's correctly owned, and then there's under and over. And if you're going to tell me that TJ McConnell went off at 50 and Seth Curry went off at 6, then yes, Seth Curry was a better play last night. But as far as the projection goes, projecting TJ McConnell higher was obviously correct. I could spend 10 minutes we really don't have to justify that. But, it went the other way, and that's going to happen a lot. So perfectly reasonable for people to reverse analyze the situation. I encourage that sort of thing. But, it came down to an ownership question. If you're going to tell me that we were that there was that much less ownership on Seth Curry, and last night we're getting more of a sign that without McCollum, he is the guy who's going to get the lion's share of the time. That's a couple games in a row. Before that, the first couple games McCollum was out, they really moved it all the hell over the place, where sometimes you got Hood minutes and sometimes you got more of the minutes went to Layman, and then you had Turner and Amino. Just the wing situation there was far from clear. But especially with now the elimination of Nurkic going forward, I think we can be pretty sure Seth Curry will be the guy who gets the biggest boost there. So that's I don't think anyone was incredibly off base, but just I think there's a general misunderstanding of when you say this player is if you look at two centers tonight, if you look at Karl Anthony Towns and Vooch. Now Towns is more expensive. I like Towns a lot. He's probably my top overall play on the slate. He should score $1 billion here. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the matchup. Vooch is still going to outscore him raw points 1 out of 4 times or so. Maybe 1 out of 5, maybe 30%, but somewhere in that range, Vooch is just going to get on top of that, which is why the ownership tonight, if you have Towns at 30% and Vooch at 14, and I'm pulling numbers out of my ass, I'll probably stick with Towns. If you have Towns at 45 and Vooch at 7, I would rather play Vooch in a tournament. So it's just one of those things you have to understand. Everything exists in a continuum. Someone said back away from the microphone. Am I too loud? Man,
there was some light echo complaints, but not enough where I think it's an actual issue. So I think you're all right. But maybe if you want to, I don't know, if you want to not be a pervert into the microphone, people saying you're heavy breathing, I have no idea. Anyway, could have been me. I could have just been panting over here like my dogs. No, I'm with you on that. I would have been on the same side as TJ McConnell yesterday. I was in my lineups for the most part, but unfortunately, not things all break that way. I think Philadelphia getting boat raced in that game was also not the most likely outcome, but it happens. Right. Let's talk about some chalky guys today, Eddie, because I think we're going to have to hit these up front. The Bulls value, a popular point of discussion. A lot of people pointing out perhaps they don't have the upside to justify even being in a tournament lineup at all, because the odds of perhaps them clearing 30 fantasy points might not be the highest in this matchup against Toronto. But what would you do with Shaq Harrison and the boys? Ryan Arcidiacono rising in ownership. Antonio Blakeney, people seem to have adjusted a little bit on, but Harrison, Blakeney, and Arcidiacono all going to have a decent clip of ownership. So what would you do?
I mean, Blakeney is probably the sort of most specious of them. This all ends up being site dependent. On FanDuel, my favorite would probably be Arcidiacono at point guard if you can spare the spot. Again, there's a lot of point guards we like paying up for tonight. But 3,600 and droppable makes a ton of sense there. DK, the price on Shaq Harrison is pretty appealing, and he's a guy who picks up his points in lots of different ways. I don't think you should feel compelled to force them. I imagine I'm going to come in under the field on most of them because there is just some other value I rank similarly. On that team, you could play Wayne Selden instead. On other teams, there's 20 teams playing basketball tonight. You can find other places to go, but objectively, I imagine one of those guys ends up being fine. They're going to have to score their 80, 90 points somehow. It's not a brilliant matchup whatsoever. Obviously, the DK price on Lauri Markkanen just makes a fair amount of sense based on him maybe taking 28 shots, and if he can make half of them from the field, he's going to pay off 6,700 pretty easily. But he's been bad, and the matchup is terrible. So I suspect, based on the amount of chatter around them, I would come in a little bit under on all the bowls. But having a bowl in your lineup makes some amount of sense. Someone will have to come out and be good among all these guys at 3,500, 4,000. You probably look at Shaq or Ryan or Blakeney or Selden. One of those guys probably gets you towards 30 and works just fine. I think stacking it up is ambitious because it's. I mean, they've played. This is the fourth time they played this year, and Toronto whooped on them pretty heavily the first two times. Third game was close, but even then, not just a massive fantasy scoring environment. And again, I'm a much bigger fan of stacking games once these slates get shorter. When you have a full 10 games, just the math doesn't work out. You pay a larger penalty to stack a game, and your odds on that game being proportionately to the other games super brilliant go down. So, yeah, like I'm fine if you have a bowl. If you're on DK and have Lauri and a cheap bowl, I'm fine with that. On FanDuel, if you have a bowl, I'm fine with that. I do suspect that I would come in under them based on just the amount of chatter as a team and the fact that it's a pretty shitty matchup.
So I guess let me ask you a counter question because we had a similar discussion about Memphis on Friday. Obviously, that went a different direction. We've seen it now twice with Conley out. And I'm just asking you, like, not me criticizing in any way, just actually curious what the difference to you would be. And I think people would be wondering as well. You have a big usage vacuum now for Chicago, obviously a bit of a different matchup. But I think, the Raptors D, the Magic D for the Grizzlies, not that different. I mean, I think close enough. The pace difference may make it up. So what's the difference between those two spots?
You're asking me why can we? One of it is that the players we're talking about on the Bulls are even worse as far as offensive coordination. Like Arcidiacono, is a guy who's been sort of my guy this year. Like I've liked him like 4 days, including 2 days. He was super not chalky, and it turned out. So I'm hesitant to put my Archie streak on the line here. But they are simply not the offensive players that you can get out of Delon Wright and Tyler Dorsey, or just generally a tier better than Shaq Harrison or Blakeney or Selden or Arcidiacono. So that has a little bit to do with it. And the second thing was just, Memphis ended up in a real cakewalk matchup. I expected it to be more difficult defensively. It just didn't turn out. They were not guarding well. You look at a couple big Dorsey games recently. It's not likely he goes out and makes whatever it was 4 straight 3-pointers to open the first quarter in one of those games. And so you're always dealing with fringe situations. But I will suggest very gently that some of those were over performances by those Memphis squads. Is it possible you get a big game out of all these guys? Yeah, I suppose, but it's even a slightly tougher defensive matchup. It's a much tougher defensive backcourt. The line is even a little bit bigger. There are more reserves they can draw on as opposed to a Memphis team that was even a little bit thinner. So it's a similar situation where it is an unlikely outcome that you get lots of viable fantasy performances out of them, but it's not impossible. I think that was a top 10% Memphis outcome, and to see something out of that where you got, I don't know, let's say 35 plus fantasy points out of 2 out of these 3 value guys, it's possible. It's in the 5% likelihood range, but it's certainly something that could occur.
Okay, that seems fair to me. So one question from J12 in the premium Slack. What kind of groupings would you have for the Chicago guys? Do you feel like there's any sort of duplication of efforts where you might want to avoid having 2 guys in the same lineup?
I generally would be disinclined towards that. There are enough other good value plays here that there's a pretty negative correlation in playing, say, Arcidiacono and Shaq Harrison, and just that it's a tough matchup. Points are going to be difficult to come by anyway. the odds on one of them getting there, okay, now you're needing them both to get there, and when you go somewhere else, you just have the out on the guy you go to getting there instead, so you just sort of, you're not even dead in the water there. If it's a brilliant matchup, it's like, okay, these guys aren't that great, but I think they can both really, really produce here, then I sort of, get going along with that. In this case, I would be generally disinterested in having more than a value bull. That seems dicey to me. I will say that I think the minutes on Arcidiacono have been underprojected. I've seen a lot of people talking about like mid to high 20s. There was a blowout game. There was a game he didn't play the entire fourth quarter due to the blowout. There's been many of these games Chris Dunn has been in. Now you're dealing with no Dunn, no Porter, no Levine. I have Arcidiacono at 33 minutes, so I do think that I disagree with some of the minutes projections I've seen around. I have not looked at ours, but I would have him well north of 30 minutes. I think that's the most likely scenario here. Though not certainly locked in stone. Again, they have backup guys they can throw out there to the TLC, Selden, all those guys who can pull some of the minutes. So I can see a way, even absent a blowout and absent injury foul trouble, that he only gets minutes in the high 20s. But I do think the most likely scenario would be him north of 30.
And we do have a minutes projection of 31 for Arcidiacono. Okay. If you want to get Josh's projection.
I would nudge that up by 2. I have 33, but that's certainly, mine may actually be ambitious because I probably dropped it to 32 because 33 is closer towards a ceiling projection of what you're sort of hoping for him when you project him to put him in a lineup. But I would still go north of that hesitantly.
All right, last Bulls item for now. The starting lineup's out. It's Arcidiacono, Harrison, Selden, Markkanen, and Lopez. Does Selden being the starting lineup and Blakeney being dropped down change anything for you?
Makes Selden a little bit safer. Makes Blakeney probably the better play of the two. Believe it or not, he'll end up backing up the 2 and the 3. It wouldn't change the minute projection a ton for me, and it'll just swap the ownership around enough. That I'll go with. I mean, if Blakeney is going to get there, it's just because he's a gunner and he'll just take all the shots he can get his hands on. And in the event he does that, you want him even more off the bench where he's spending more time along, Felicio and other guys where it's a little more possible for him to get up 19 shots in his 28 minutes and maybe bludgeon his way to value. So at that point, I'd probably go more to Blakeney than Selden as my third option on this team. The pricing makes a little bit dependent, but I'd still generally be happiest about Arcidiacono on FanDuel and probably still Shaq Harrison on DK. Shaq Harrison, just a guy who contributes in enough ways, hustle guy that I like going to that. Re-uploading the ranks, tell me if these don't stick. Someone just told me they don't have them, so let me try this again.
So while you're doing that, I guess, would there be any Raptors you'd want to run it back with? Like Kyle Lowry, to me, I think is vaguely interesting if the Bulls somehow keep it competitive. So I think, you're talking like your build, you mentioned probably need a Lowry and a cheap bull in there to justify having a Lowry in there, a Kyle Lowry in there rather. And Kawhi may be interesting for, like more of a cashy play, I guess. But even then, I'd rather pay for LeBron or take the risk on the Houston Bucks game. But any Raptors for you at all, Eddie?
I don't have an issue with you in a tournament running. Probably the order I would have interest in would actually be Siakam, Lowry, Kawhi, none of whom I'm super excited about. The line is obviously relevant there. I mean, it's just a giant slate. So single lineup, no, I don't think I'm going to end up there. If you're playing 150 lineups, I would have some single-digit ownership of each of those guys. But there's just the pace isn't particularly appealing. They can share ownership a little bit. Kawhi less likely to. Kawhi always a guy who has such a less variable scoring profile. There's a pretty small delta for a guy of his value that just rarely hits the super ceiling. Having both Siakam and Lowry in there tends to limit that even more. The fact that there's a big spread. I don't mind if you end up on these guys. I don't think Fred VanVleet is out of play on DraftKings, but all those guys would be 2, 4, 5% ownership guys for me. Again, I'd probably most prefer Siakam, a little bit site dependent, but probably Siakam, then Lowry, then Kawhi due to the positionality and the prices.
All right, so let's go to
another ranks. Let me know now because I got it confirmed uploaded again. They should be there.
I'll double check while I do that. But let's go to another game. I think they did go through. Yep, it looks like they did go through.
Good.
But any problems with that, leave in the chat, guys. Let's go to another game with a bigger total here. I'll try to get the 2 big total games out before the halftime game of Daddy Likes. Let's go to Atlanta and New Orleans. New Orleans, a high total. It's only gone up throughout the day. I have it at a 242 combined total right now, which is the highest on the slate. Ironically enough, higher than the number 2 game by a little under 30 points. So that's quite a big difference between that and Orlando, Miami. Obviously, Atlanta, Trae Young going to be popular. John Collins a little bit less popular. New Orleans is picking up popularity throughout the day with AD out, but the rotations there haven't been great in the last 2 games because of blowouts and some foul trouble, and it seems like a bit of a risk for the Pelicans there. But Eddie, what are you seeing in this game, and how comfortable, I guess, are you with the New Orleans side?
I'm pretty comfortable with it. Once you take AD out of there, there's just enough usage, and even in limited minutes and basically best possible matchup you're going to grab, I'm still a pretty big fan of the New Orleans play. My favorite play from this game is probably Kevin Huerter, relative to his ownership. At that price, I expect him to get his 30-something minutes. He has shown the ability to take some shots and make them. FanDuel, 4,300 and still very droppable, 42 on DraftKings. I really like Kevin Huerter. He's probably, relative to ownership, my favorite play in this game. He's the guy I would probably have the greatest share of relative to ownership. I think he plays 30 minutes. There's an upside of a couple beyond that. There's not much of a downside of much under that unless things go badly. And just this is an environment where he should get plenty of Frank Jackson defense and a couple other guys I really think he can take advantage of. This game should be a track meet. There's going to be turnovers and pace, and just he is a guy with upside who is cheap and low owned. Relative to the field, I imagine that would be the player who would be my favorite from this game. Past that, not a ton to add beyond the obvious. Elf looks great. Trae Young obviously looks great, still underpriced, especially considering the matchup. John Collins and Randall, I probably do slightly prefer Randall, though at price it ends up being really close to me, and I imagine the ownership on Randall is a little bit higher right now. Collins has shown the ability, especially in an environment like this, to pretty easily give himself his 20 and 10 game. I really like both the point guards and both the power forwards as your sort of building blocks from this game. Obviously, a number of other guys we can talk about. Frank Jackson himself, who I just alluded to. Price a little higher on FanDuel, is 56.51 on DK. Again, just sort of a gunner. I have him projected pretty similarly to Kevin Huerter, which is why I think I end up on Huerter a little bit more. Who's going to be less owned, and I have projected pretty similarly, and saves you either, I think it's $800 or $1,400, and shooting guard on FanDuel as opposed to point guard. So I'm a pretty big fan of getting to Huerter before him. But that being said, in 150 lineups, I'm going to have 15 or something of Frank Jackson. Check the Owl, certainly fine to play in tournaments. Prefer him on FanDuel where you can drop him. I don't know if he's going to get 12 or 26 minutes, but if it's 26, it's a smash spot for him. Dwayne Dedmon on DK. Again, not going to make it into one lineup for me because of those power forward center hybrids. I think you have to put Thomas Bryant and Al Horford just a tier above him. Really love both those guys. I think you end up with 4 centers tonight, counting those guys a fair amount of the time in a single lineup. They both project a little too well for me to get away from for a guy like Dedmon. But that being said, minutes have looked a little bit better. Fine spot for him. I have no issue with you coming in on any amount of Dwayne Dedmon. Even the lesser known, Darius Millers, Kenrich Williams. I don't know, Kenrich Williams was getting his 40 minutes every game. That's come down to like 25 each of the last 2. Not out of play at 4,200 on DK. Again, he's forward where you can just play Huerter, who I would prefer, but another guy who I'd have some exposure to. Taurean Prince got himself back up to 30 minutes last game. He's in play for me in that spot. I'm probably drawing the line somewhere north of Vince Carter. Probably not going to end up there.
Alex Len's a guy I'm getting a lot today, and we have him on our latest update at under 1% ownership.
Yeah, which I'm fine at. I mean, you need some foul trouble on Dedmon. This no longer, especially in the absence of Anthony Davis, an environment in which I think they really need to, stack up going super big, which is something you would want for him, where you can get more of that more of that time next to Dedmon. At this point, you're looking for some sort of Dedmon foul trouble, but if you get it, or just randomly get 24 minutes of Len, or in a blowout, that's more possible. Obviously, an environment where there's massive upside. So there's very few people who there's any chance of playing, say, 24 minutes in this game that I don't think there's a decent chance of. Julio Okafor, when you now have no Anthony Davis, now makes a very compelling play for me. Is your best drop center if you're on drop center on FanDuel. DK, again, difficult for me to prioritize aside other hybrid centers and centers who I'm a particularly big fan of, but a very, very strong tournament play who, again, the minutes are really tough to project. Julius Randle himself, I do think, there is a pretty hard cap on those minutes at 32, 34. Wouldn't be shocked if we saw like 35, but they're clearly not going to super overextend him. But that being said, I have him for more than a fantasy point and a half a minute here. This is a pretty stellar spot. This happily answers some specific questions comparing guys there. But besides the note on Hoarder, who to me represents the most under-owned quantity in the game, pretty big fan of almost anyone who we can expect to see any markable time here.
So related to this game, then, who would you take out of the point guards for FanDuel cash in particular, Trae Young or Elfrid Payton?
I think I would take Trae Young for cash. I feel a little safer in it. The matchup obviously not as good. No one's matchup is as good as the guy going against Trae Young, but a little more comfortable in the upside. But they both profile brilliantly. Elf, little more concerned about the minutes, little more concerned about the health, little more likely to sit down in a blowout. So in the context of cash, probably a little more inclined towards Trae Young. Tournament would just come down to ownership for me. I would expect, especially with Elfrid Payton bearing the mark of Kane, the Q tag and the thing, that just always has an effect on ownership. Probably in a single lineup, slightly prefer Elf. Saves you a couple $100 on FanDuel, and I think $600 or $700 on DK. That's probably enough for me. Again, sans Drew Holiday, sans Anthony Davis, obviously a guy who can put up some triple doubles. Again, one of 5 people in history to put up 5 consecutive triple doubles. You know the other 4?
Well, Russ has to be one. Yeah. Or Oscar Robertson.
Yep.
Wilt.
Yep.
All right. Is that it? Am I missing one?
That was 3. There's one more.
Oh,
he's a guy. The second greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan, did it also. So those.
Okay. That's pretty good, though.
It's a good list to be on, I guess was my point. When you're like, the worst guy on that list is clearly Russ, you're doing okay. So, yeah. So, I probably prefer Elf in tournaments, and I also think you get him a little lower owned. I'm going to look. We have Trae Young at 26. We have Elf at not immediately obvious. Okay,
Elf.
I'm assuming we have some.
Elf 13.
I'll refresh because 0.5% can't be correct.
Yeah, no, the most recent update is at 13.
So. Okay, there we go. But yeah, I have him projected pretty similarly, just a little more solid than Trae Young, but Elf obviously not anyone I have an issue getting to a large amount of.
Fun time, William, and it's fun time in the premium Slack every time. So use that promo code live before lock to get in there now. And some people in the YouTube chat also just exclaiming Stanley Johnson. So your thoughts on Stanley Johnson as another cheap value guy?
I'm fine with it. Getting in there in the minutes. I think we can be a little less secure in it, but again, the Anthony Davis news mints him as someone we can expect to see in the 24 to 26 minute range. It's just a brilliant environment. So yeah, I think probably would project him higher than Darius Miller. Probably go with Darius Miller in a tournament, even with his 5 less minutes for the ownership being less, because Stanley Johnson getting some chat and some pub today. But I would rather play Stanley Johnson than any of the Bulls guys. At their price and ownership and location. So I'm a big fan of Stan. Yeah, Stan's the man.
All right, let's see if we could squeeze in some Lakers Wizards thoughts here. We'll obviously revisit some of these things as we go. But Washington visiting the Lakers, another total going up throughout the day, now up to a 236.5 combined total. Lakers looking pretty strong here. LeBron, minutes cap seems like it's gone by the wayside as he's rambled on about appeasing the basketball gods and wanting to put forth full effort. He's been over 35 minutes in his last 3 games. What are you doing with this one? I'm intrigued by LeBron quite a bit. Tomas Satoransky, also a guy popping up, and Thomas Bryant going to be one of the most popular plays on the slate, who also looks pretty good, but I wonder if his ceiling is perhaps capped by the time with Bobby Portis. But give me your thoughts, Eddie, on this game.
Nah, I still love him a lot. He's I think, pretty obviously one of the 2 best. The centers on FanDuel are Karl Anthony Towns, Thomas Bryant, and then you have a conversation, but those 2 guys rank out for me as pretty brilliant. He's just still underpriced for being a very productive fantasy guy in a brilliant matchup with the Lakers. Projects very similarly to JaVale McGee, except we don't know if JaVale is going to get the minutes, and JaVale costs way more. So I really like Thomas Bryant. I'm not going to object to almost any amount of ownership on him, and forward eligible on DK.
Would he be a slam dunk play for you? So I clipped him a little because I do think he might have not as high of a ceiling as it seems. I think it's still a good spot, but I think if he gets you 40 fantasy points, you're probably happy, but maybe that doesn't win you a tournament. So I'm at 45% with him right now. I think he's going to end up over 50.
Yeah,
What would you do?
I mean, having 35% of him is fine. Having 60% of him is fine. I wouldn't 100% because obviously there's a possibility of failure and it's a massive slate. But no, I think he has a 60-point ceiling. I don't think
Okay.
he's had multiple giant games this year where he just came out of nowhere in good matchups. Um, the games where there was a game where Keith went out against the Bucks, he threw up 50 something. It's just a ideal environment. They've really embraced the youth movement there, if you will. So no, I don't have at $5,200 or $6,000 a ceiling concern on Thomas Bryant. I'm in no way surprised to see him get 50 here. He's had, I will say, 3 50-point games this year. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I could be wrong and it's 2, but even if it was 2, this is just about the best possible spot he's going to do it, and all the minutes in the world are there for him. So no, I'm in for it.
What about the other guys here? Satoransky, price up a little bit, but seems like he's been assisting more. I think he's actually benefited from having Thomas Bryant in there. A lot of easy dump offs for him.
Yep.
But the price is getting tough there. Beal as well. I feel like the price is a bit tough if he's going to play mid 30s minutes instead of 40-ish, and they're not playing for a playoff spot. So what would you do with those guys?
Yeah, I think, again, versus ownership, sort of the Kevin Huerter of this game is Jeff Green. I think it's likely he gets up towards 30 minutes. Again, he's way too cheap on FanDuel. Makes an interesting punt small forward. Obviously, Troy Brown is of some interest. I don't know if we get 27 or 35 minutes, but he's still the stone minimum on FanDuel. So for that reason, for some immediate leverage, I sort of like a Jeff Green pivot off him, but just Troy Brown himself projects brilliantly. I like Satoransky in his 6K price range. His production has stepped up, as you mentioned, for a couple reasons. One of them is just that when you get 33 minutes of Beal as opposed to 42 minutes of Beal, that's just going to increase your time touching the ball, handling the ball, picking up assists, etc. So I'm fine with Sato, not a guy who would make it into a single lineup for me. Garrett Temple will start for Landry Shamet today. Interesting. I wouldn't overreact to that news. It's very, very nice for Lou Williams, who's one of my favorite guys today. This is a really nice spot for Lou. I'm not at all. So I have Lou projected for just a touch under 40, and he's like $6,700. And I wouldn't be shocked if he got 50 here. Had 50 last time these two teams got together. This is a Timberwolves defense that has fallen off the map as far as their ability to stop, really anyone. So Lou and Montrez, still guys I have a lot of love for. A little harder to get to Montrez on FanDuel just because you're in the world of John Collins and Randall in a similar range, but still have a lot of love for him there. All three of those guys make it harder for me to get to say Kevin Love. Yeah, so Temple, I think at this point still plays 18 or 20 minutes, but that's fine news for Lou Will, and again, that team's still playing to win. You're looking at a giant Lou Williams ceiling. Shout out for I had a fun take on Devin Booker the other day before he was going off, where I was like, Devin Booker could be dumb tonight. I mean, dumb, and someone clipped it and sent it back to me when he was going off for a bit there. So yeah, I don't know exactly how I danced through a few games to get there from your
one LA team went to another, but no, let's finish up the Lakers for me. Give me some thoughts on LeBron and the rest of the company there.
I like Bron. It's obviously the price on. It's interesting at the top today when you look at him versus Giannis. I like Giannis generally in the spot here, and there's enough value that I think he and Harden both make sense as guys who can just bang out that super ceiling. It is not the best spot for either of them, but we've repeatedly seen you can pull 80, 90 out of Harden and Giannis, even in really difficult spots. Both teams still obviously playing for everything, so there's a chance of getting all the minutes for those guys. So I slightly prefer them in tournaments to Bron just because I think it's a little more likely they bang out super ceiling games, but Bron with the best matchup of them pretty significantly has exceeded that minutes limit several times recently, where we're seeing 35 minutes out of him, even though that wasn't supposed to be the thing. I will say the Lakers are on a front end of a back-to-back, which gives me, I think that's sort of what gives me enough of a pause where I slightly prefer going to Giannis, just because I think it makes it more likely I get 28 minutes out of Bron here, which isn't what I project him for, but I don't think is at all impossible, and for that reason, I'm probably moving those other places. But I don't have any issue with whatever amount of LeBron James against the Wizards you want to roll out in the hammer.
Is tomorrow a road game for the Lakers or a home game?
I don't have it in my notes. I'll tell you in about 30 seconds.
Because I feel like if it's a home game today and a road game tomorrow,
it's home today, I know, which is one of the reasons I liked Bron more. I think at this point with them having a loss, tomorrow they're on the road. They're at the Jazz.
Yeah.
So
I feel like you're getting full of, I think you're getting full LeBron tonight, personally.
I do agree that is a cookie. Absolutely. The matchup tomorrow is harder at altitude, which is not irrelevant to me. And they're at a point where it's kind of a lost season, so one of the few things they are playing for is good favor among the locals. So LeBron playing a little more, looking a little better. So I do think the fact that it's at home is mitigates the extent to which I would be concerned due to the back-to-back, but it's still just enough for me to throw him a peg under there. If you're telling me I have to build one lineup and I have to play Giannis or Bron, slightly more inclined to play Giannis at this juncture. But, I have, by a very small measure.
All right, let's talk more about that Bucks-Rockets game after we do a little halftime Daddy Likes. And if you want to play along with us right now, get the ownership projections for yourself. Use the promo code Live Before Lock. Get half off on any package, any NBA package. Those are still going on. We'll be going through the playoffs strong. Also have MLB packages. So if you want to get an all-access pass at awesemo.com, you could be involved in the MLB things. The entire team is doing NBA pretty much. Also does MLB along with Jake Hari moving over from NHL at some point. So get in there now. Use that promo code Live Before Lock.
Not me. I'm holding down the fort.
I'll be with you. I did my column last year throughout the entire playoffs, so I'm ride or die with NBA. That's my choice.
That's all I'm doing, though. I'm saying that like it's.
Oh yeah. Oh no. I'm bi-curious with my sports. Sticks and balls for everything.
Don't totally sleep on KCP either. We've got no Reggie Bullock. We've got no Josh Hart. I think that KCP is going to see 32, 33, 34 minutes. Price obviously not as brilliant as it has been, but is a guy who carries an upside.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you. I had a little bit of KCP, so I support that. And the usage has been there too. He shot 12 threes last game, which if he did that versus the Wizards, that would go a lot better, I think. Thomas Bryant, number one on the list. How does Daddy feel about 39% ownership?
I'd be over that, which is tough to say on a 10-game slate. And it's important to understand that is a massive ownership on a 10-game slate. I just can't get around what I have him projected for, how good that matchup looks, and the fact that they've really committed to him. What's really interesting is, I'll interrupt you for a sec to talk about Charlotte. Charlotte has done something similar where they've given, a bit of a youth movement with, how they're distributing their center minutes and cutting back the minutes on Jeremy Lamb a little bit and Marvin Williams a little bit, and you're seeing more of Devontae Graham and Dwayne Bacon, who it's Bacon, right? Yeah, it's Bacon who remains in play on FanDuel. Obviously, this is all 1%, 2% stuff, but he's 3,900 on FanDuel. Without Batum out there, that guy's getting some really, really serious minutes and doing a lot in that second unit.
Over 30.
So that's a guy to keep some exposure to the Baconator there.
And Bridges too. He's in consider. I have a couple.
Actually, the price on Bridges is not too much for me. Like, I was happy to be in front on Bridges, whatever it was, 3 or 4 games ago, right before his big minutes started. I was like, I think they play him out the rest of the year, whatever. And he was 38 on FanDuel, and did very well for me on that day. At this price, I can't, against the Spurs, in any good conscience, recommend 5,055. I think is the price on FanDuel for Bridges. That ends up being too much for me. Kemba not out of play. I mean, I shouldn't have to say it, but the matchup not a terribly bad one for Kemba. It's just, again, single lineup. You have Elf, you have Trey. Those guys cost whatever less. Makes it really hard to get there, but at whatever 5% he's going to be on, I certainly don't have any issue with some exposure to Kemba there. What I was going to say is really interesting is one of the reasons they went to sort of their youth movement was the fact that they were down in the playoffs. They were down to, using 5/38 percentage odds of making it, which I think are the best single source to look at for that. They were down to a 4% chance to make it. Some Jeremy Lamb heroics, a couple other good games. They're up to 14%. Like, ever since throwing the kids some minutes, Charlotte's odds have improved significantly. They are not dead in the water here, which is one of the reasons I would be a little more comfortable rolling out Kemba. I think he gets his 35, so certainly something worth considering there. The rest of the minutes are a bit of a mess. You're seeing fluctuation on basically everyone else there, but Kemba, Willie Hernangomez, you can take a shot at. Probably plays 20, 24 minutes. As a guy who carries a ceiling, at this point I would rather play Okafor if I'm bargain basement diving at center, just for game environment, if nothing else.
Kemba, too, also playing for third-team NBA and a bigger contract, so something to note with Kemba. All right, back to Daddy Likes. Number 2 on the list, we got Shaq Harrison at 4,400. He's projected for 36% ownership right now. How does Daddy feel about that one?
Yeah, I'd come in well under that. Like, I'd be about half that. I like Shaq Harrison. 4,400 is not 3,000, is not 3,500, is not 4,000. Like, that is actually a reasonable tag. I'd be much more interested in playing Gordon Hayward for $400 more, or Kevin Huerter for $100 or $200 less. in obviously a much better environment. So yeah, I would come in under that number. I like Shaq Harrison as a player. I've talked about him a lot ever since summer league, and Phoenix getting rid of him for no good reason. And someone I'm really acquired with. I'm fine with him on FanDuel at 4,800 if he runs in there, where he's a guy who really can't accrue giant batches of steals, which obviously throws him a ceiling. Although Toronto not a team generally inclined to help you out with that task, but. Yeah, I would come in certainly under 30 whatever the hell percentage against the Raptors. That's too much.
Number 3 on the list, the Golden Arches of Ryan Arcidiacono, 32% ownership expected for him. How's Daddy feel about that?
Yeah, same thing. Ludicrous, and I like Ryan Arcidiacono, but not an environment. And again, I give myself one of the many pats on the back I'm apparently going to give myself. There are spots in which he can function and spots in which he can't. This doesn't strike me as the best Arcidiacono spot. FanDuel 3,600 droppable, knock yourself out. And again, I have him on the upper end of the minutes, but I have him at 33 minutes and 23 and a quarter fantasy points. I don't need him at 30 whatever the hell percent. So yeah, I'm going to also come in way under that number. I think one of these guys gets you, 30 or something. I'm fine with having a bull, but these ownerships are way too high on a 10-game slate. I can roll off 7 guys in tournaments. I would rather go than him.
All right, how about number 4 on the list? Karl Anthony Towns, 28% ownership. How does Daddy feel about that?
Yeah, I'd have more. He's brilliant. I haven't projected for a touch north of 60. Matchup is as good as it's going to get. Still no Rose, no Teague. There is 70, 80 point upside here. Minutes seem solid. Hopefully game stays close. But I'd be over that. He's point per dollar, probably your best spend-up option. Feels really good. Enough hybrid centers. You're not sacrificing that much at the position on DK. Obviously, the FanDuel price a little more concerning, but still just looks brilliant. So, yeah, I would get in on top of that number.
Yep, I support that take too. And number 5 on the list, actually tied for number 5 on the list, Trae Young and Julius Randle. How does Daddy feel about those two gentlemen?
I like them all. I'm guessing that number is 23%, give or take one.
Oh, yep. They both are at 23%. My bad.
Was it 23?
Yep.
Top of the head, that one. Go Michael Jordan.
The number of the second greatest basketball player of all time, according to Fast Steady Fear. And I would go number 1 still.
And the greatest, my friend. Actually, generally my take is that LeBron is the best basketball player of all time, and Michael Jordan is the greatest. Really depends what you mean by greatest.
So we're saying like Michael Jordan's Paul Bunyan, and LeBron's like the equivalent of a real good lumberjack.
Michael Jordan is Babe Ruth, and LeBron is Barry Bonds.
Okay. You know what? I can live with that. I think that's a fair way to put it. The way you explain that.
What does great mean? Who is the best professional wrestler of all time? I don't know, but the greatest is Hulk Hogan. Just like he was the greatest. He had the transcended the whole goddamn thing. There's a lot of guys who are better than him, were better on the stick, wrestled better, etc., etc. But he was the greatest. Michael Jordan's the greatest. Do I think he's a better basketball player than peak LeBron James? No, I don't. I don't actually find it terribly close.
All right, that's fair. All right, so let's go. Let's see. Actually, one question about the Laker game. We closed out Daddy Likes. So, yeah, get in there if you want to check ownership projections yourself. Use the promo code Live Before Lock. Get half off your first month. People asking about Lance Stevenson. I guess we didn't mention him. I have too much Lance right now, to be totally honest. But what's your stance on Lance?
I'm fine with it. I think it's fine as a pivot off the Chicago guys. I just think it's really obviously the matchup is super ideal. It's just difficult to know exactly how many minutes are going to be there. Can I see them rolling him out where he picks up 26 minutes in this spot? And that obviously carries a big upside. He got 25, I think, in that last game with the Kings. So sure, I think he's just fine in tournaments. The price is obviously very appealing, but I don't know how much time randomly gets thrown around to Caruso, Wagner, Williams, and all that junk. So I'm fine with it. I'm fairly ambivalent. I think he's gonna end up with more on. What do we have him projected for ownership? Is he at like 8?
He actually. Oh no, he's higher than that. He's 19 now.
Yeah. So same theory. There's just enough. I avoid chalk that I think can easily fail. So, and again, I think it's been pretty successful this whole year. If I was going to talk about one thing that I hope I add in value is there's been, 29 times this year I've been like, this guy's way the hell too popular, goes somewhere else. And 3/4 of those, that guy failed or at least was not brilliant and you managed it. So, Lance in this spot, 8-10%, I would be ambivalent. 19% is just too much for me. I don't know that necessarily those minutes come out. He's not 100%. They are on a back-to-back. obviously all the ceiling in the world there. But even in that last game, right? So he got 25 minutes against the Kings, which is a better than average matchup. I had 18, 19 fantasy points, I think. So you need a lot of things to go right there. So I'm fine with lines at 19%. I would come in under that number.
All right, seems fair to me. Getting questions. What are your thoughts on Luka Doncic playing today? He's been a popular discussion point. Obviously, he had his minutes not that high in the last game, but went nuts. Had like a 2 fantasy point per minute production versus the Warriors. What do you think about Luka? And I guess what would you do if Luka were ruled out late?
I'm obviously super fine running Luka out there. I feel like these two teams get together and play about every 10 seconds. But I feel like this is like the 6th game between these two teams this year, and it isn't. It was the 4th and final one, I'm sure. Sacramento is sort of the more interesting piece there because we had Bogdanovich come back and play 30 minutes in that last game and close. So we've ended up in a situation where a lot of the guys in an environment that we like, I like the matchup with Dallas, and there's some ceiling there. I think we're safe with the minutes on Hield. I think we're safe with the minutes on Fox. Probably pretty safe on the minutes with Barnes, but the whole time that we're going to get out of, Bagley seems like he'll get his 20, 29, 30 regardless. But, someone is getting screwed on minutes, whether or not it's Bjelica, who's still kind of appealing at a cheap price in a decent matchup at a sticky small forward position, or Cauley Stein, who will play 20 or 30 minutes, depending on what's going on. And now that Bogdanovich is back there getting some real time, again, shout out, I'll probably just play Kevin Huerter. But, so that's an interesting team. Luka is an interesting position. Obviously too cheap. I don't know what it is with the algorithm, especially on DK, that refuses to give him the ownership he deserves. Really difficult to go there on FanDuel, obviously with some uncertainty as to whether he plays. But the Mavs not on a back-to-back. I have no extra insight as to whether or not he necessarily plays. I think we're all pretty well familiar with the guys. We're sort of looking at if he doesn't. But in a world with all these other guards that we're particularly big fans of, I feel like it's a bit of a luxury, but high upside, risky play, on FanDuel if you want to run it at this point. I think he is a tremendous play on DraftKings if he plays and starts, which is, I think, 60-40 likely to go.
All right, give me the notes you have on the rest of the games because there are some that we didn't touch on. We touched very briefly on parts of Houston, Milwaukee. Also, people have had questions about the Orlando game and their motivation with the playoffs. So whatever you have, Eddie, let's do it before we get to questions.
I'd go for an hour and a half. I don't
limit yourself to 6.
I don't even know where I'd start. There's so much. All right, so
Boston guys too with Kyrie.
Right, Celtics. About what you would expect. Again, I think Horford is a brilliant play, especially with the multi-positional eligibility of the DraftKings price. He's one of my favorite plays on DraftKings. The line on this game only 4 or 5 points, which feels particularly great. Kyrie being afraid to come back and play in Cleveland again. That's twice in a row. He hasn't played in Cleveland since he played for Cleveland. So FanDuel probably order of preference is Smart than Hayward. Actually, it might honestly be Smart than Rozier than Hayward. DK, you can get away from Rozier pretty easily. FanDuel, I'm not terribly afeared of it at 6,500. Again, this game projected to stay close. A guy who, when he starts and gets the time, can have some big games. Has started 2 games in Cleveland this year. One game was shitting at 25. The other game had 48 or something. So I don't know what the FanDuel price is. Or the FanDuel price is 6,500. I don't know what the ownership is. But I have, a non-zero amount of interest there. Hayward is a little bit too cheap for what he can do. Has looked better recently. We can expect him to see get his 30 minutes here. I like Gordon Hayward at a sticky position on FanDuel where he's 54 and on DraftKings where he's multi-positional eligible and only 48. Pretty big fan of that as a play, so he would end up next to Horford as my favorite play there. And the environment minus Kyrie makes Smart playable everywhere, Jaylen Brown playable everywhere. I generally prefer Tatum to Marcus Morris for both projection and the Mark of Kane just will inordinately lower his ownership. So I like getting to a piece of the Celtics, yeah. As far as the Cavs go, I don't know if I'm going to flat no anything, but it's pretty close to a flat no. Just the environment isn't great. The minutes are halved up a little bit there. I can't necessarily know what's going to happen. In the front court last game, we had Zizic entirely out of the rotation. Love starting next to Nance. You want to take a shot at Nance, especially where he's like 5,300 in a tournament, but the matchup is certainly prohibitive.
I'm taking a few shots at Nance. I think he's an okay play today.
Yeah, he's. It's just an environment where just the Cavs are going to struggle to put up any sort of real point. Maybe you pull like 40 out of Nance, but I think most likely you're getting your 28 to 32. And again, I'm playing him over Thomas Bryant, or I'm playing. So if you want to play him in a tournament, pivot over him, that's fine. But I'd still rather go to Horford doing Deadman and about 16 other guys before I ended up there. So Cavs almost a flat no for me.
All right. Any thoughts on Orlando with their motivations? Still, I mean, it's a very important playoff battle in the East, but also a very bad total.
Right. The matchup is shit. Both teams very solid defensively. I would probably, for ownership, go back to Terrence Ross, who's always going to be I have an upside, I have a downside. Sort of like Deion Waiters across the ball. I'm 1-for-1 on Waiters calls this year, and I don't think I'm going to push my luck. But he's like 4,200, probably gets close to 30 minutes. Miami's still running pretty deep as far as rotations goes. You have just a lot of guys in that 25 to whatever minute range, and not a great matchup with Orlando, to say the least. Pretty disinclined towards members of the Heat. I can see, the Yahoo price on Olynyk is too cheap, and I can see, in a lot of tournaments running out some Adebayo. But yeah, Orlando, you can look at having, those 6 guys playing 30 to whatever the hell minutes. But the matchup is bad enough that, again, just raw points, it's difficult to project them. So if you end up with a 4,900 as the price on Isaac on DK, sure, that's in playing tournaments. It's worth pointing out, in 3 games against the Heat this year, Aaron Gordon outscored Vooch in every single one of them. I don't think I end up there really quick. Even on FanDuel, where the price is a little more advantageous, you have Randall and you have Collins and you have Kuzma in a really good spot, and you have lots of guys. I think I would generally end up there first, but that's not irrelevant, having come in and being very good against the Heat. Now, I still have Vooch projected for well more fantasy points. I don't think that's apropos of a ton, except to say there were 2 50-point games for Aaron Gordon against the Heat this year. That makes me a little more comfortable throwing that bullet out there if I was going to do it. But, again, generally on a slate this big, I would be more inclined to play the Magic due to the Heat, due to a tighter rotation, and, again, them basically playing for the 8th seed tonight.
All right. Let's see if there's any other items we have to hit. Anything else that you want to hit on? I think we got most of the stuff. Any Harden thoughts? Harden, obviously a spot. Basically going to be an NBA Finals preview. I mean, a low probability NBA Finals preview, but a potential one. 2 MVPs going at it. Seems like a high-profile spot as well, national TV. Any Harden interest, or perhaps PJ Tucker, who shot 7 threes the last time they met?
Yeah, I slightly prefer going to Giannis on DK and Harden on FanDuel, where the price is actually pretty appealing. I mean, we saw him up around $13K for a bit there. I would rather save the money and go with Harden and run a couple punts generally on FanDuel. No super advanced analysis. It is a good to slightly better than average matchup for both guys. Milwaukee has an excellent defense. Houston doesn't play at a great pace, but no reason they can't get to their ceilings here. So I think you can make a lot of balanced lineups playing all these 8K guys. Even looking at the one game between Atlanta and New Orleans, you have Elf and Trey and Randall and Collins, all basically $8,000. All those guys are going to project point per dollar better than Giannis or Harden. Those guys a little bit less likely to give you 85, which is a real possibility. So if you end up with a game with less balanced and running some number of punts, DK I slightly prefer Giannis at 11.3. FanDuel I slightly prefer Harden at 12K. But I'm fairly ambivalent as to how much I like them, and I imagine we have their ownerships in the 13-15% range, which is about where they should be. So no great advantage spot there to take, I don't think.
All right, let's burn through some questions. We got the Maharishi asking J. Rich and Brown or Prince and Green for a FanDuel GPP.
I'm trying to figure out which Green. We have 3 today.
Gotta be Danny, right?
Yes, you said FanDuel, so It's a small forward and a shooting guard. So it's Danny. It's not Jeff.
Yeah, I agree.
Who's also in play. Gerald is out, so thankfully we are spared that national nightmare of Greens, and the Warriors aren't playing, so Draymond isn't there.
Also not Mr. Green from Reservoir Dogs, so don't worry about him.
It's definitely not. Why do I have to be Mr. Pink? I will... Sorry, give that to me again.
It's J. Rich and I presume Jaylen Brown or Torian Prince and whichever Green.
Oh, you know what? God damn it. No, he's asking about 2 sets of small forwards. He's asking about Josh Richardson and Troy Brown. His first names are...
So he just messes up on all.
Yeah, he found all the plural last names, but he's asking about a pair of small forwards. He's asking about Jay Rich and Brown, or Jeff Green and who is the fourth guy?
And Prince.
Yeah, that adds up. I'll play Prince and Jeff Green there. But that's what he's asking, I think.
For the future, if you have a color-based last name, give us a first name as well.
Yeah.
Let's go with that. It's a good rule of thumb. JaVale and Blakeney for our guy Dave, or Bryant and Wade for a FanDuel GPP.
I'd probably run Blakeney and McGee at this point, especially with Blakeney coming off the bench. I think I'll slightly prefer.
Who would be your favorite GPP player at 4K on DK?
Fair question. Well, I'm going to take a look. Again, if you have like 4.2 or whatever it is, Kevin Huerter. But it's just going to be terrible tonight now that I gave him 17 mentions. It really might be Dwayne Bacon.
Oh, yeah. Or, I
It's
mean,
Dwayne
Lance,
Bacon
I still,
or
the ownership.
Lance,
Yeah.
or Jaleel Okafor if you have center available. Probably Okafor if you have center available.
Lance, okay. FanDuel cash, would you go Harden and Johnson or Smart and LeBron?
Okay, so that's Stanley.
I would hope so.
Sorry, I got to figure this out.
No, you're right. I hope it is.
There's a couple Johnsons too. It is because it's a 2 and a 3.
There's too many
FanDuel
Johnsons.
cash, I would play Smart and LeBron.
LeBron or Beal for a FanDuel GPP?
LeBron or Beal? Again, I'll assume there are drops involved in that question. I would play LeBron.
Okay. With Sterling Brown starting, do you prefer Sterling Brown, Selden, or Blakeney as a FanDuel shooting guard punt?
Blakeney.
Harrell or Collins for a FanDuel GPP if you already have Lou and Young?
That's really close for me. I will slightly at that point go to Collins.
For Yahoo cash, would you go Kevin Huerter and Frank Jackson or Josh Okogie and Ryan Arcidiacono?
The first one. Pretty significantly. Okogie is not a guy I want to play in cash.
Thoughts on Sterling Brown or Garrett Temple to pivot off Chicago chalk value on DK?
I would rather not use either of those players. I don't think either of them get significantly above 20 minutes. So I would rather play the Chicago guys than either of those guys. Also, neither in a matchup I'm particularly thrilled with. So I would rather not pivot. I will play Temple there if I have to play one of those two guys. Doncic's expected to play.
Still, those minutes still worry me. He hasn't been above 30 in a while. I think he's capped at 29 is my guess from what I've seen. I worry a little about Doncic. I wouldn't load up on him necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think it's a load-up situation. I can't take him over either of the point guards in the Atlanta game. So he comes down the list for me just because of some of the other excellent options. But 55 out of him here would not surprise me. So I like getting to some Luka again because his ownership will be artificially reduced for his questionable tag. Again, long time strategy point for me that I'm pretty positive on at this point. Guys who are questionable have their ownership reduced by a massive margin, and their production is just similarly not reduced as much. I like Clint Capella in tournaments. Not someone you need to obviously pile stack on, but it is a spot where I think he can come into a big upside. Someone mentioned, so I wanted to mention that.
Sure. Who would be your best pair for a FanDuel GPP at point guard? Paul, Young, or Peyton? I guess which two out of those three?
Young and Peyton.
Do you like Horford, Gordon, or Smart in DK GPP MME?
Horford at 59, Gordon at 67. Assuming he's referring to Aaron, and Smart at a guard at 50. That question is very strange to me. But the player amongst those I'm most excited about would be Al Horford.
I'm actually with you on that. I've a lot of Horford. Harden and Johnson. Oh, we did that one already. Don't post questions multiple times, guys. You throw off everything.
Well, sometimes they ask once, you don't answer for a minute. They ask again, and then you run it. You know what I'm
well,
saying?
I keep an elaborate queue of questions that I go.
I didn't mean to presume the other way.
Thoughts on Okafor one more time? Seems incredibly over-owned at 20% on DK.
Yeah, 20% is, again, more than... There's just a lot of good value Hornets. Now, like, he projects very nicely at that number, assuming I think he gets 22 minutes. He might get 15. He might get 29. But with Anthony Davis out, he's priced very well. 20% doesn't seem like a crazy over-ownership. In the low threes, there is not a lot of very impressive value, so I'm fine with it. Not a guy I'm going out of my way to make sure I have exposure to. But, prices nicely. There is an upside there. The matchup is obviously as delicious as it's going to get. So, yeah. I don't know.
For FanDuel cash, would you go Blakeney, Giannis, and Stanley Johnson, or Smart, LeBron, and Troy Brown?
For cash, I'd play Smart, LeBron, and Troy Brown.
Sterling Brown or Blakely as value on DK?
I'll just play Blakeney, I think, in almost every situation there.
For FanDuel cash, would you go Selden, Blakeney, or Garrett Temple?
In cash, I would play Selden.
For DK cash, would you go Selden and Shaq Harrison, or Blakeney and Miles Bridges?
The first one.
For DK cash, would you go Herter, Kenrich Williams, and Alfred Payton, or Harrison, Smart, and Young?
The second one in cash.
For a FanDuel GPP, would you go Hayward and Collins, or Gay and Bagley?
I gotta go Hayward and Collins. Rudy Gay looked very good for a few games, fell off a little bit the last 2 games, and I'm not sure he gets more than 20 minutes here. I've had difficulty determining the times in which I expect him to actually run out Pirtle versus Gay, so I have very little confidence in the minutes there. So I gotta go the other way.
Thoughts on DeRozan for DK GPP?
I generally prefer Aldridge between the two of them today, if that's a factor in your question there. But I think he's in play. He's fine at 77. There is certainly a ceiling there. Aldridge obviously coming off a big game, but also a matchup I think plays a little better for him against an undersized, undermanned, and just generally poor front court. So I think he's fine to play. Don't love him, and again, does not compare points per dollar. Ends up being 8-10 points shy of the guys in that Atlanta and New Orleans game, but you can obviously run DeRozan in a tournament. I'm pretty ambivalent.
Yeah, I ended up with some DeRozan, so I would take him, but I get why. I get why you go with Aldridge. Hayward, Gay, Barton, or Bielitsa for a FanDuel GPP?
Hayward.
All right, FanDuel GPP, Collins or Bagley?
Yeah, I will take Collins under almost any situation, but Bagley not out of play, but the minutes total limiting him a little bit. Not the greatest pace in the matchup, so Collins will be well higher owned, but I project him for I think 5.5 more fantasy points, so I have to take John Collins there.
All right, we are locked. We did it. Got all the questions out on the premium Slack. And if you're on YouTube right now, the way to get your questions answered when we do our short on time with a long slate like this, especially is to get with that promo code live before lock, get access to the premium Slack. In addition to all the people in there, all the questions that obviously we answer from there, a lot of people talking back and forth, people talking about their lineups during the last hour. So check it out. Get in there.
Yeah, we got to most of it. I don't know how to just start talking on this slate. Like I have, a paragraph on. Let's see. Here we got Buddy Hield. Here I'm talking about Darius Saric. Here I'm talking about Rondo. Here I'm talking I could just be talking. So I just have to defer to you to sort through what's being asked about the most because
I'm doing the hangover math gif every time to try to balance out, make sure we hit on everything. But I think we got most.
I do not envy your position. It is a difficult one to be sure. Let's see what's biggest on DK today.
Oh, yeah, time for America's favorite game. Of course, it continues to be that Daddy likes. Let's see what old Daddy likes here. How many games do we have?
At 7.
Yep.
Is it just the one? We had, certainly the Celtics and the Cavs went off at 7. I know there may be one more. I don't know. Let me click on this thing here and
Spurs,
see.
Charlotte? Spurs, Charlotte.
Yeah, I guess Spurs, Charlotte as well. So number 1 at 14.2%, Al Horford. I would want more than that. And again, if he isn't questionable to probable to whatever to start the day, that number is 21%. It's just a good example. Is there a chance that he is limited in some way due to his issues? Sure, but that number is well smaller than the added benefit you get from his artificially reduced ownership. Marcus Smart, 13.5. Gordon Hayward at 13. I would generally be more inclined towards Gordon Hayward there between those two guys. I don't mind Marcus Smart, but more of a FanDuel play for me always. Obviously shooting guard eligible both sides with just the steal scoring and the various other things. But certainly nothing wrong with it. Cleveland no Kyrie, etc. That's pretty self-explanatory. I'd prefer Hayward we have here at 13. LaMarcus Aldridge at 12. Yeah, I mean, that DK price is really nice. Dropped 50 against Charlotte earlier this year. Not in any way surprised to see it again. Ownership going to be limited due to, like, it's hard for you to go there with, again, that whole Randall Collins situation and Horford, who we just discussed, at $2,000 less to the dollar, who I've only projected for about 6 fantasy points less, but no issue with that. Miles Bridges, 11%. I would come in under that. I like Miles Bridges quite a bit, and I do think, he obviously gets the time here, but that price is just a little bit more than I want to pay for him in what's not an ideal matchup. Kevin Love, 10%. Probably be a touch under. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. This game projected to stay close. If it plays 4 quarters, he's your best run back guy, probably, from Cleveland. Getting over 30 minutes the last couple games, seeing 32, 33. That was a lot of our concern with his production. Slightly prefer Aldridge at a very similar price tag, and again, prefer Randall and John Collins. But, again, this not dissimilar to, say, Seth Curry, and Tim McConnell, in that, Kevin Love is going to outscore both Collins and Randall 15% of the time, 20% of the time. So it's just a question of relative ownership when it comes to those guys. Kemba, 10%. I like that. We discussed it extensively. Same deal with that other game. These are all plays that if, one or more players in that other game don't get where they're supposed to go, and you probably don't get 45 or more out of Elf and Trey and Randall and Collins, and someone there is probably going to screw the pooch. So DeRozan, 8%. I'd still slightly prefer Aldridge even at 12. Tatum, 7.3. I like that. Nance, 7. I think I'd be under Nance. Obviously, 5,300 is a price tag. Very appealing. But the matchup is really bad, and I'm not locked in on the minutes necessarily being there, and that's enough for me to turn off. I think he probably plays 30. If he played 26, I wouldn't be shocked. Again, one of the rules we could have applied to the season is that whenever possible, and even a couple times you would have thought it was impossible, they found a way to give Larry Nance fewer minutes than he should get. So
that is accurate.
If randomly he plays 24 minutes tonight because they play Zizic 12 again, because they're just like, they were going big with Horford and Baines, and we had to do it. I'm in no way surprised. It's just their treatment of him and him alone really is very New York Knicksian.
A hurtful comparison for any team.
Yeah, true. Jaylen Brown, 6. Sure, I'm fine. That's about where that should be. Dwayne Bacon.
I like him after the disappointment on Sunday for people. I didn't play that slate, but people were really mad at him. So.
I was in Chicago. I only heard that he pooped himself.
You only heard murmurs of the uprising against poor Josh.
Jaylen Brown crapped himself today. Actually, I was meeting with our boss man Tom himself, and we're sitting there and he's looking at scores on his phone, and at one point he's like, "Oh, Jaylen Brown was shit." So that even trying to get away from it followed me to a Starbucks meeting. Dwayne Bacon, 5.5. I'm fine with that. He's still very cheap. Again, slightly preferred him on FanDuel as a sort of Troy Brown pivot. Or they both made fine just spending the $7,400 for him there. I'm projected for north of 20 fantasy points. Matchup obviously not ideal, but 3,900 droppable makes a little more sense there, but 5% on DK is fine. Derek White, 4.6. Yeah, that price tag has come down. Again, giant minutes consideration, but it's a matchup we like a lot. I am surprised. Most of the times when you see minutes moving around, I'm like, oh, it's because they're trying to go younger, or because he's had issues on defense, or because he doesn't play well with this guy. I was surprised his minutes got pulled back. Now, it is because he was not playing that great after a string of great games, and Popovich has a number of backcourt players he's very familiar with. Patty Mills, who's been there for a while, and he has some degree of trust for Brent Forbes, and you can run Bellinelli out there, so he doesn't need to run Derek White 30 minutes, and he has proven that point. But I still was surprised they didn't give him a slightly longer string. But if he's playing well, and there's no reason he can't in this environment, if you get 32 minutes out of Derek White here, he's a great play at that price. Terry Rozier, 4.5%. I'm fine with that. 6,800 again, a little more than I want to play there. But again, 45 or 50 out of him here is not at all impossible.
Ohio native Terry Rozier, which I learned today.
Also
did not know he was from Ohio.
Not gonna lie, you love your Big Willie ownership. Yeah, he's next on the list here at 3.4. I just Spurs, man. It can Sweet Dick Willie Hernangomez throw out 35 and 25 minutes here. Sure, he's not out of play. I would have preferred going to Okafor in this environment, but 3% is 3%, so I wouldn't hate it. Jakob Poeltl, 2.29. I suspect you get the Rudy Gay game and not the Jakob Poeltl game, and he's been pretty bad recently. But centers versus Charlotte is a thing, justifiably a thing. So I don't have a problem. At 2%, I don't have a problem going like, yeah, but Poeltl could play 25 minutes and get 40. Yeah, he could in this spot. So I'm fine with 2%. Colin Sexton, 1.6. Again, if you could do anything but score, price tag really starting to, price him out a little bit for hitting any sort of true upside. Like, you want your guys who you're spending 6K on to have, like, an outside shot of giving you 50, and against the Celtics, you're asking a lot out of Colin Sexton there. But, certainly no reason to think he'll abjectly fail. He gets all the minutes, but more of a cashy play for me. Chetty Osman, 1.4. Fine, more likely to pull enough peripherals to hit some sort of decent ceiling. Just running into a glut of guys of Cavs here. Jordan Clarkson, 1.3. Sure. Marcus Morris, 1.3. Sure, I'll legit go with I like that at 1.3. Jeremy Lamb, 1.2. Again, was super hot shit for a while. Price got all the way up. Going a little bit more with the kids, and you're seeing his minutes down in that low mid-20s area. That's a little concerning. But 1% Jeremy Lamb is obviously a guy with an upside. Tony Parker, 1%, might play. Rudy Gay, 0.77%. Price coming down a little bit. If you got 28 minutes out of him, that's pretty brilliant. You might get 20. That's a little concerning. Marco Bellinelli, 0.7. Sure.
Just like Mama used to make, a little Marco Bellinelli.
Very nice. Very nice. Of all the cork soakers I know, that's obviously in the Saturday Night Live skit about cork soaking. It's a good one. You should look that up.
It sounds familiar, but yeah,
it's a fine one.
I got triple double guys. I can't get two things at once.
fair. Brandon Knight, 0.5%. Again, Celtics. Patty Mills, 0.4. Sure. Devontae Graham, 0.4. I'd like that a little bit more. Marvin, 0.4. Yeah, not impossible. That they need the size. They're thin at center. Maybe pops back up to 30 minutes if he does 4,400, 4,500. Those prices obviously brilliant. Tristan Thompson, 0.4. Don't hate it. Decent against Celtics, decent against Horford. 15 minutes last game. But, get some foul trouble in there if they decide to, completely lay off Nance, which again is something they are wont to do. Maybe you get 25 minutes, 0.4% if you're going to do it. That's where you do it. Tice, 0.3. Sherbrand, Forbes, 0.3. Aaron Baines, 0.22. Frank Kaminsky, 0.19. Davis Bertans, 0.16. Bismack Biyombo, 0.15. Ante Zizic, 0.15. Might play. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, 0.12. Might play. David Nwaba, 0.1. Malik Monk, 0.07. Might play. Nick Stauskas, 0.05. Brad Wanamaker, 0.04. Cute. Greg Monroe, actually active, 0.02. Gershon Yabusele, 0.02. Marquise Chris, 0.01. Semi Ojale, 0.01. Kyrie Irving, 0.01. Congratulations. You played yourself. He don't play in Cleveland.
Oh no, that lineup came with a Uncle Drew DVD, so that's why it was a promotional lineup that they got. You had to play Kyrie.
Shout out to Kyrie Irving for actually looking like he's like 50 years old.
This year has aged him like a presidency, I think.
Yeah, he's got that Barack Obama thing going on. But he's got that Greg Oden forehead where you're just like, Jesus, man, moisturize. Tristan Thompson will start. So ahead of Larry Nance. You got it. There it was, buddy. Shit, I told you.
There goes my two Larry Nance lines.
I told you. You're like,
you can win those minutes back.
Nope. They found a way to. So I like Tristan now. Obviously, that game has started. That news I have coming out at 7:02. So congratulations to those brave souls who locked him in there at 0.4% or whatever. Now he probably gets 24, 25 minutes. I like Tristan a lot. So if you went there, shout out to you for. And again, that was likely not because it makes any sense for a team in development, not because of the matchup, but because they do whatever they can to screw Larry Nance Jr., who again, I must have, I don't know, molested someone in the shower or something. It doesn't make any sense. He's a fan favorite. His dad played there. Everyone there likes him, and they do everything they can to keep him off the basketball court. He's on a long-term contract. Like, it's the weirdest thing ever. I have no idea what's behind it. None. If someone knows in the show, again, there's probably still 1,000 people watching, someone please send me a video that explains why Larry Nance literally gets the minutes rogering every chance they get.
It sucks too, because I like Tristan Thompson, and I love that stretch early this year where people just weren't playing him, and he had 40 points a night, and I felt like I was a genius just playing him. And he's not going to get enough minutes now to do that because there's too many bodies in the rotation, and it's a waste of everybody. And I hate stupid Cavs.
Yeah, but they do that. So yeah, a lot of people who made Yeah, so Thompson got the start. Celtics starting who we thought they were. Pirtle and not Gay getting the start there. So the people who took the shot on Jakob Pirtle, that's a pretty good spot now. So I'm a fan of getting him at the percent they got him at, and Taj Gibson out. So another guy I didn't have time to mention though. Dario Saric, especially FanDuel. 27, 28 minutes likely. Not shocked to see 4,100 at power forward. Pretty delicious there. So yeah, stuff.
All right, so everybody hit that like button on the way out. Any notes you want to hit before we go? Anything else in your mind that we didn't get out there?
Oh, I got tons of, but I was sitting here looking at my notes. I'm like, I have 11 and a half pages of notes, and with Daddy Like and everything else, I'll have 36 minutes to talk. I could literally micro machine speed read through the shit, and I wouldn't get there. So, you hit the high notes, the guys who I think are under-owned, a la Pirtle or a la Kevin Huerter. Guys with weird double vowels in their name, Pirtle and Herder, right there. Sounds like a German buddy cop movie. It's a German buddy cop movie. Pirtle and Herder.
Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, and his son. That's him breaking his son into the movie.
Yeah, there you go. Herder, I barely even know her.
On that note, let's just call it. Everybody like the video on the way out. Use the promo code live before lock. If you're already dreading your lineups for this regular slate, get into the night slate. We are night slate specialists. All of our management team fantastic at night slates and really brilliant with ownership and stuff. So check that out on the site. Use that promo code live before lock. Half off your first month on any package. Get some MLB and NBA. Get everything you need at your fingertips. And Eddie and I will be back tomorrow. So any parting words for the folks, Eddie?
Nope, all good. Back at it tomorrow in a more tolerable slate size.
All right, guys. Have a great night. See you guys then.
We